What's happening, everybody? Welcome once again. This is Syracuse basketball postgame presented by Krause Health. How about this? We're coming off the heels of a win. It's been a minute. It's been since Valentine's Day that Syracuse picked up a win. That bad four-game losing streak over for Syracuse. They get a win on Senior Day. They get a win on the day celebrating the 2003 national championship, and two players that were key on that team, Jerry McNamara and Hakeem Warwick. Ceremonies just wrapping up now at the JMA Wireless Dome of their jerseys, heading high at the Dome. Final score, Syracuse 72, Wake Forest 63. Great to have you on board here once again on Syracuse basketball postgame. We'll hit your comments here shortly. And Syracuse has ended the regular season with a record of 17-14, 10-10, and even 500 in ACC play. They're going to face this same Wake Forest team Wednesday at noon as the 8 seed. Wake Forest will be the 9 in the ACC tournament. So the Demon Deacons up again for the Orange in just a few days. And folks, this was the Jesse Edwards show at the JMA tonight. He had 27 points, that ties a career high, and 20 rebounds. Judah Mintz with 17 points, 5 assists on the day. Joe Girard with 16 points on the night, and you have to wonder if we saw the final performances of all three of those gentlemen at the JMA Wireless Dome tonight, Joe and Jesse Senior Day, and who knows if Judah will jump into the NBA draft or not. We shall see. Was it Jim Boeheim's last game at the Dome? A lot of questions about players that could transfer as well. All to be answered in due time. But for now, Syracuse gets a win, as Marty says, finally. Chris notes, much needed win for this team at this point. Nicely done from Antonio. Jimmy, the Flying Dutchman, Jesse Edwards from the Netherlands with 27 and 20. By the way, guys, that's the first 20 and 20 game for a Syracuse player since Paul Harris did it in the 6 overtime game in the 2009 Big East tournament. And it took him nearly 6 overtimes to get there. Jesse Edwards does it. Wake Forest just could not stop Jesse. Obviously, they got into foul trouble. Both their big men. Syracuse dominated in the paint. You know, you've seen Syracuse give up 15 or more three-pointers in the last 4 games. Wake Forest couldn't get there tonight. They go 10 of 39 from three-point range, shooting just 25%. So finally, Syracuse got some relief there. They answered every time Wake got close in this game. Wake started the game 1 of 12 from three-point range. They actually hit 5 in a row after that, threatened maybe to kind of get in this game. But every time they did, Syracuse had an answer. Judah Mintz, who was great tonight, attacking the rim, extending his right-handed shots, and just looking great on the court. Girard needed to step up tonight on what could be his final game at the Dome and did. But, I mean, this just keeps coming back to Jesse Edwards, friends, the Flying Dutchman. Great job from Coach Boeheim and company. Dale says left some points at the line, but made up for it with points in the paint. Yeah, points in the paint. Let's look at that stat. Let's look at a few stats here. I mean, really what you need to know is Jesse with 27 and 20. But, you know, both teams shot around 40%. Syracuse shot just 2 of 14 from three-point range, believe it or not. Didn't really need the threes tonight with how much they dominated in the paint. They out-rebounded Wake Forest 43-36. Wake was actually dominating that stat earlier. Wake ended up with 16 turnovers on the night. They had 12 in the first half. But points in the paint, where it at here? Syracuse 40 and Wake Forest 26 in that category. So the big three were big, but I think that Malik Brown had a nice game off the bench for Syracuse with 8 points and 9 rebounds. Benny Williams started, didn't do much, didn't even score in this game, played just 8 minutes. Chris Bell plays 28 minutes back in the starting lineup, but he was 1 of 7 with just 3 points and 3 rebounds on the night for the Orange. So kind of going back to old habits there, where this team wasn't getting much from the rebounding, wasn't getting much from its forwards, but they didn't need it because the big three, the 3 big J's, Judah, Jesse, and Joe, come through for Syracuse tonight. Much better defensive hustle, as Dale notes here. Many more to come, Christina says. I believe in that. Look, all they've got left is the ACC tournament. And they've got to win the ACC tournament to go to the NCAA tournament 4 in a row. is improbable as opposed to 5 in a row, which would be impossible for this team. It's never been done, nor could this team really do it. And look, they got a better defensive effort tonight. They got a huge effort out of Jesse, Joe, and Judah. Their offensive flow is better. Their hustle was better. I mean, to go out with a win, they just needed it. There was a great atmosphere in town the past couple of days, guys. You know, they had the terrific ceremony last night where the team, the 2003 team, rewatched the national championship game from 2003, and they kind of did running commentary as they did it. There's some great clips on the Cuse Basketball Twitter feed. If you missed any of those clips, I would highly recommend that you watch that after this show, of course. And it was great. There was a great vibe in the air. Carmelo Anthony getting a huge reception, as you can imagine. And then, you know, the ceremonies afterwards with Hakeem Warwick and Jerry McNamara. It was just, you couldn't lose for those guys. That's what it kind of felt like. Carmelo had a great message for the team last night, which you can see on the Cuse Basketball Twitter account and what he told the team. And it just felt like they couldn't lose this one. They needed the jolt. You know, well-timed there. You know, after you lose 4 in a row, you got Jim Boeheim Tuesday night talking about playing for pride, and that team had given up an average of 95 points in its last few games. They only give up 63 in this game after an average of 95 points the last 3 games. Yeah, Wake Forest certainly helped with how they didn't shoot well in this game. They've lost their best 3-point shooter. You've got to take that into account. Jim says here Wake's trashed after getting beaten up in the past few games. But we'll take the win after all the ballyhoo. A lot of ballyhoo. I like that word at the Dome tonight. So, yeah, that was certainly a factor. Wake's lost 4 of its last 5. They're kind of sliding here, but Syracuse, beggars can't be choosers. They needed a team that they could beat. They needed a team that they could take advantage of the matchups, which they did. Wake didn't have their best 3-point shooter. Sorry, they still had the best player in the ACC out there. Had a great game. Let's see what Appleby did in this one here officially. Appleby, 21 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds. He's going to finish as the first player in the history of the ACC, which is wild to think about. But he's going to be the first guy that's going to lead the league in points and assists. All the great players in the history of the ACC, and Appleby's going to be the first to do it. Go figure at this point. Skylar notes it here, the steals for Judah Mintz. He had... and he leads the ACC in steals, so no surprise there. In this one tonight, 3 steals, but Jesse Edwards, to add to his 27 and 20, he had 5 steals in this game too. So, you know, that defense was working for Syracuse. They certainly needed it to. They needed to get back on track. Joe says, just watch the jersey ceremony. When JB took the mic, I thought he was going to say, this is it, right? Yeah. Jim Boeheim grabs a mic in that situation. You just don't know what's going to happen, right? But did not in this case. Jim noting here, going to be interesting to see a rematch between these two in Greensboro. Yeah, you can't get into foul trouble. You got to figure out how to guard Jesse Edwards in that game. And how to, man, look, Jesse was great. And Jesse is the story in this game. No question about it here, okay? But I just loved the game that Judah Mintz played. I loved how he attacked the rim, stretching out in a tribute, if you will, to Hakeem Warwick, who had so many stretch shots as a Syracuse player. Judah today just would drive down kind of on the wing and just kind of stretch out and just kind of kiss it off the glass, right? I mean, he's so versatile around the basket. He was aggressive. And look, I would hate to see it if it was his last game at the Dome. Jesse and Joe, I think it's a distinct possibility. It's their last games. But if those 3 come back, okay, you add in whatever you add in from the transfer portal. We'll see what Syracuse loses in the transfer portal. They don't have much in the recruiting front right now. We'll see what Marcus Adams does. Adams is a highly touted prospect who technically is in the class of 2024 right now, but 2023 is something he can reclassify for. So that would be 2 recruits for Syracuse, along with a 7-2 project and William Patterson that they recruited. So we don't know what they have coming in addition to those guys. Certainly they're going to hit the portal. I mean, you have to in these days in college basketball. There's already been a bunch of players that have indicated to Syracuse they'd like to transfer. But if you can get Joe, Judah, and Jesse to come back, now you got something, right? I don't think they're going to get all 3 of them back. Of the 3, right? I mean, man, if you can get Jesse Edwards for another season after the terrific, almost all ACC first team run he had this year, you'll take Joe scoring. Judah Mintz is just going to be so much better next season. His 3-point shot slowly but surely started to come together at the end of the year. He'll work on that in the offseason. That's the only thing missing from his game. I think that's ultimately why he'll come back. Hello from LA. Michelle, hope the rain stopped out there for you. As Brian notes here, need Judah and Jesse back next year. So look, we'll see who comes back, and you got to think about these things, right? Merritt's saying that post-game ceremony kind of sounded like a retirement speech. Yeah, perhaps, right? Like the possibility's got to be there that we just watched Jim Boeheim's last game, coaching it in the JMA Wireless Dome. One last opportunity to kind of address the fans there. I mean, if he retires, obviously they'll have a big press conference and they'll make a big to-do about it, but to address the fans directly after a win too, one last chance there. And if Jerry does take over for Jim, that seems to be what the plan would be, either Jerry or Red Autry at this point. So we shall see what those words mean, if they mean anything here. Jim's certainly going to be asked about it a bunch going down the stretch here, but Antonio noting here too, John Bolajok, they do know, is going into the portal. He told our Mike Waters that in his exit interview, that he is going to take his 2 years of eligibility and use it elsewhere. So they do know they're losing him, ladies and gentlemen. Mike says, I thought Boeheim was going to announce his retirement, but didn't want to steal Jerry or Hakeem's thunder at this point. GMAC sounds like he's ready to be the head coach. Let's see. Yeah, Bernie notes here. John Bull's already been in the portal a few times now, but he is going to be back out there. Jimmy says Jimmy will be back in this point. Christina noting that the kids from the Make-A-Wish Foundation sitting courtside with Adam Weitzman. Yeah, usually we see celebrities sitting there, but some kids got what a thrill to be right there and be courtside and hear what Jim Boeheim's saying, hear what the players are saying. I'm sure the players were saying hello and dapping it up with those guys. And courtside for the post-game ceremonies, 2003 team, little history lesson for those kids. Carmelo with a great message at halftime for the fans. Hakeem Warwick and Jerry with a great message for the fans. Jim, as people noted afterwards. I'm sure you'll see some highlights and some clips of that if you didn't get a chance to watch the post-game ceremony. So, hey, it just – I feel good for you guys. I feel good for the fans, right? Because these last 4 games have been rough, to say the least. When you average 95 points as an opponent the last 3 games, it shows you just how the defense just bottomed out. But they showed up today. They played with passion. They played with pride. They played with heart. They were clearly inspired for their coach, Jerry McNamara, for the 2003 team that was back. Wake Forest helped a lot by missing a bunch of threes, and they could not stop Jesse Edwards in the paint. So that's a big concern for them, I would say, going into the ACC tournament on Wednesday. So Syracuse, the 8-9 game, so they would play the number 1 seed on Thursday. And kind of shuffling around here, I know Virginia's the 2 seed. So you had Pitt and Miami playing for essentially the 1 seed, playing for the I'm just checking the score of that game. So Miami's up 57-49 right now, guys. So things are still kind of in flux in terms of what Syracuse is looking at for if they do beat Wake Forest and who they would play on Thursday, because the ACC title is up for grabs here. Virginia's 15-5, Pitt, Miami playing right now. So we'll see how that plays out and who the number 1 seed would be that Syracuse would play. But that's the situation they are in, and they've got to win 4 in a row, and they have got to do that if they have any prayer, any hope of making the NCAA tournament. And they're not even NIT bound at this point. So just good to see Syracuse win a game and kind of go into the one and done scenarios they're in from here on out with a little push and a little momentum and playing much better. Now you play a team on Wednesday that you can beat, right? That's what was missing from this team the last 4 games. Mojo, confidence, spark, passion, closing on defense, right? For Jesse Edwards to, man, if I Steve Forbes, the Wake Forest coach, he's going to have a big headache over the next few days, trying to figure out how we're going to stop Jesse Edwards next time. Carr fouled out tonight for Wake. I don't know if their backup ended up fouling out. I'll check it while we're yapping about it here. But let's see. Now, he didn't end up fouling out, but he had 4, Clintman. So that is going to be something. And Malik was looking good in the paint as well. Blake brings up a great point. Better rebounding today as well. Let's look at that rebounding number, what it ended up being. I think we mentioned it earlier, but just to go back to it here. And Syracuse got out-rebounded in the first half. So it was 43-36 on the boards. At halftime, that was a 24-20 mark in favor of Wake Forest. So that was kind of a, not necessarily a hidden gem, but there was so much focus on how bad the defense has been. Syracuse have been getting crushed on the boards the past few games as well. So for Jesse to drop in there and get 20 rebounds in this thing, I mean, everything was better, right? And they only shot 2 of 14 from 3-point range. You scored 72 points and only 6 of that comes at the 3-point line. I think that's got to be a lot better if you're going to make any kind of run in the ACC tournament. Defense, 3-point shooting, rebounding, all critical in that scenario, as Chris Mad Dog Russo would say. Is that a record for Jesse? I don't think that is the record, but I think it's near it. I believe Derek Coleman once upon a time had that record, and he had about 5 or 6 more rebounds than that. I'm not sure what the official record is, but certainly is near it. Let's see. Mike thinks Benny needs the ball. I mean, in a game like this, he doesn't need the ball when Jesse Edwards is doing his thing, right? Rob says, credit the team for hanging in there, battling back, following what felt like rock bottom the other night. Yeah, if you're going to hit rock bottom, do it with a game to go and get some momentum going into the postseason here. As Michael Antonio notes, this could be a tournament quality squad if they actually played harder on defense this year. Bell maybe do more, but Benny Williams looked like he checked out. Jesse's first 2020 since Paul Harris. Yep, we noted that earlier, Brian. Since the 6 overtime matchup in 2009, he was 29-22 in that matchup there. Let's see. Dajuan Coleman is in the coaching world. No, you mean Derek Coleman. Yeah, everybody said that Derek Coleman would be a great coach. Derek Coleman's done some coaching. Dajuan Coleman also in the coaching game now a little bit. And that's been an interesting topic of conversation through the years. People feel like Syracuse needs a dedicated big man coach. I mean, you got 3 guards on the roster and coaching roster, and Red Autry, Jerry McNamara, and Alan Griffin. Look, I think basketball is basketball, right? I don't think it would hurt to have a dedicated big man that can relate to those guys. But, if you're a coach, you know the sport and you know the game, and you can teach guards, you can teach forwards, you can teach centers, whatever the case may be. Chris with a good question here. I'd love to see Jimmy Lee and Rudy Hackett get their due from the 1975 Final Four team. Go old school a little bit and get those guys honored for what they did. Every other Final Four team is represented in some way. This team now, the 2003 team, has 3 players on it. Let's go back to 75 and get those guys some recognition as well. Mike notes Herman Hareed. There's an old school name for you out there coaching in this world. Will Mike Hopkins come back to coach the Orange? Mike Hopkins certainly may be available because I don't think he's going to be coaching Washington that much longer. So you got to keep that in mind, that he went to Washington and is probably on his way out. Had a couple of Pac-12 Coach of the Year runs there and a couple of good seasons for Washington, but I don't even know if he's going to be coaching there next year. So take that into consideration, that he probably coached his way out of Washington. I think a lot of people would certainly take him back here at Syracuse. But would you take him over Jerry? Would you take him over Red at this point? Great recruiter. Would love to cover him as a coach. Really enjoyed talking to him when he was here. Talked to him a few times since he left as well. So honestly, wouldn't hate that. But you do have to put into consideration that things went south at Washington, unfortunately, for Coach Hopkins. I would love Matt Langle at Colgate as a candidate. I don't want to start throwing names against the wall here. In fact, if Boeheim retires, but that could be a topic of conversation that'll accelerate quickly if and when he coaches his last game here. I don't think we're going to hear anything official on that until Syracuse is done if that's as soon as Wednesday after Wake Forest or whatever the case may be. But maybe in the next week or two, we could be having that conversation, right? Let's see. A couple more from you guys. There's our guy, Mike from El Paso, dropping in. Brent, is SU dysfunctional? Bell got significant minutes after no time. Look, you're dealing with 18, 19-year-old kids that you can say it a million times. Sometimes it just doesn't register with them. You know, Jim Boeheim at Tuesday's press conference saying that Bell didn't even give it a go on 5-6 straight plays of practice. That's why he didn't play against Georgia Tech. He starts this game. He plays 28 minutes this game. Like Benny Williams took a personal day earlier this year, dropped that huge game against Pitt the other night, has been absent since. It's just, I don't know. Sometimes the inconsistencies befuddle me. And then you got a guy like Judah Mintz who goes out there and plays like a water bug every game and just has that dog in him, as the kids like to say, and charges the hoop. And a player from day one, like we could see it early in the season. The talent was there, and he just made a tangible improvement in his game to now. And I'd love to see him get a taste of the postseason here. You almost don't want him to be too good because you want him to come back next year, right? But that's if look, for all the criticisms we've had of Boeheim, they got a player like that. They identified a player like that. He was actually committed to Pittsburgh. They got him to flip to Syracuse. You know, every successful Syracuse team, go through every one of them that's gone to the Final Four or made a deep tournament run or you name it. They all had a great point guard. And I think you could say that about a lot of teams. Obviously, that's kind of, the ingredient there. You need like essentially a quarterback leading the way in a football note here to throw it in a basketball sense. But you need a floor leader, and you don't necessarily need an offensive-minded guard. Think of Lazarus Sims in that 1996 national championship game runner-up team. Z barely shot the ball. He was all about distributing the ball, all about the assists, all about being the general himself, Sherman Douglas, right? Go through all the teams, go through all the names. The 03 team had two great guards, and Jerry McNamara and Billy Edelin. You name me a great Syracuse team, I'm going to name you a great point guard that was on that team. Michael Carter-Williams, 2013. I mean, just go through them all, right? So to see Judah Mintz added to that list, David says it reminds me of Iverson at Georgetown in his first year. I think that's a great comparison. I think Johnny Flynn is a great comparison as well, and how they play, their styles. Judah's a little bigger than Johnny, but incredible. Michelle notes here that Akeem was interviewed during the second half. Asked how long it takes to get used to and good at playing the zone. He said 2 years. The zone might look better next year. Yeah, depending on who they get to come back next year. Just catching up with you guys a little bit here. Rob says, if Washington parts ways with Hopkins and Jim returns, is he tempted to rehire Hopkins and perhaps put one of the assistants' job status on the hot seat? I don't think so. I don't think that Hop would come back in that type of role. A Flynn-Iverson hybrid at this point. Bernard, Jerry sure sounded like he was taking the head coaching job based on his speech today, making sure he gets in the fans' good graces. Hey, start working the room, baby. And look, Jerry would be a terrific head coach. I think so. I'm fairly certain that's what they would do if Jim does step down here in the offseason. We've talked about it here, guys. I would just encourage John Wildhack to zoom out a little bit. Just see who's out there. See if Matt Langle's interested. See if there's some coaches out there that you think you could bring in here. But it just feels like Jerry has been getting ready for this. Red Autry as well. It does feel like Jerry is the guy they're going to give it to. When you talk to Jerry, he sounds like a head coach. I think he's earned his stripes on the recruiting trail. He knows the game. He relates to today's players. It'd be similar to what, John Shire took over at Duke. Hubert Davis took over at North Carolina. The guy after the guy, it's probably easier to do it that way, to start with somebody in the family. And if that doesn't work, then you go outside the family, if you will. I wouldn't hate it if it was Jerry. I wouldn't. I feel like Syracuse has to take a look out there. Maybe John Wildhack's already done that and determined Jerry's the guy, right? With Jim Boeheim's blessing. at this point, or Autry. You know, a lot of people assume it's Autry. A lot of people assume it's Jerry, whoever it is, right? That's probably the best route to go ultimately, to be the guy after the guy. And then if not, you take a look around. All this talk when Cuse is winning the ACC tournament. There you go, Brian. It'd be a hell of a run if they did. Be a hell of a story if they did. Put Devendorf on the staff. You know, Devo was on the staff at one point in kind of a volunteer assistant role, coached at Detroit Mercy as well. That's one thing I think you're always going to see happen. No matter who the coach here is, you're going to have Syracuse guys on the staff. It's going to be an all Syracuse coaching staff. I think that's smart. Krzyzewski did it at Duke. A lot of schools do it. Keep people in the family. This is what it means to come to Syracuse basketball, to be at Syracuse basketball, to play for Syracuse basketball. No better person to put that message out there than those that have been through it, right? So what a day. Syracuse got a win. The 2003 national championship team was celebrated. Jerry and Akeem have their jerseys up in the rafters now. And now we go into the postseason. How long Syracuse stays in that postseason, that is as good a question as any, because this team's done weird stuff before. They have not had a lot of success in the ACC tournament historically, right? Last year, they beat Florida State pretty good, gave Duke all they could handle in the game that Buddy Boeheim was suspended, but ultimately lost that game. You know, you look at just the history of this event, Syracuse has not been successful in it. It's been one of those bummers, right? Because how many great Big East tournament runs did they make? And it brings back those warm and fuzzies about Madison Square Garden. No matter where the ACC tournament is, Brooklyn, Greensboro, DC, Syracuse has not done well in it. So to go out there and win 4 in a row is going to be a tall task for these guys, because you got to get everything in sync now. You got to have your best offensive games. You got to rebound. Your defense has to continue to get better here. And you're going to play inevitably right off the bat. You win this one against Wake Forest on Wednesday, you got the number 1 seed, whoever that shall be. And Syracuse has struggled against good teams in the ACC this year. But anything can happen, friends. It's March Madness, right? As Mike says, great win. Jesse was a monster. Thank you, Brent from Nashville. And thanks to all you guys for checking in here. So here's what we got lined up here. Coming up Wednesday, it's a noon tip-off between Syracuse and Wake Forest. We'll hop on here, do a little post-game as soon as that game's over, about 2 o'clock or so. So a little different time than usual for post-game, right? Usually we're on at night, but a little afternoon matinee post-game coming up Wednesday after the Orange take on Wake Forest, and we see where we go from there. Thanks for watching tonight, though. Thanks for your great comments. Good stuff from you guys, as always. Mike thinks they can beat Miami, right? Bob thinks Gerard's going to be back. We shall see. Skylar thinks GMAC deserves a chance, and there you go. You guys keep going at it here. But I think we'll sign off Syracuse basketball postgame for the evening on that one. The Orange finished the regular season 17-14, 10-10 in ACC play, and they close out the regular season with a win at home, 72-63 over Wake Forest. This has been Syracuse basketball postgame presented by Krause Health. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you Wednesday afternoon after the ACC tournament.